Hi guys, and welcome to yet another Dash Animation System Devcast. It's been quite some time since I did a Devcast on Dash Animation System because there was a lot of work, and last week uh, I was actually attending our company hackathon, and I used Dash extensively just to test it out to see what kind of features I would need and how it actually holds up to a real world scenario. And this actually, the accumulate node, which is a specific node that comes now with the 0.4.8, is something that I had to have. It was an idea that came to my mind during the hackathon, where I had all these UI animations, and I had to execute some stuff after all the animations inside the tree. So I actually had to always pick up the branch that was the longest, and sometimes I overlooked or changed some time, and other branch became the longest, and then the execution was not executed as I wanted it, and I had to reconnect it to the longest branch, basically. For example, event on uh, screen show that should fire after all the branches basically executed of the UI animation. So let's just jump straight into it. We have this little example as usual with our menu. So let me show you. It's just basically a show event, or just execute it first. So the menu comes in. Okay, it's pretty simple. All the UIs that I've worked with are actually quite more complex. Anyway, so there is a show event that we fire from somewhere, anywhere, doesn't really matter. So we want to show this screen or this pop-up or something. Then we have a null. I always use null to manage multiple inputs. So for example, if I wanted another event here, I just had to plug it here instead of reconnecting all these nodes. So that's why I use a null node. It doesn't do anything. It's basically just visual. And then we have these three branches. First is our branch that sets the position of the children, so they are outside of the content once it animates in. Let me show you. Basically, if I don't do that, they are inside the content, so we need to put them outside, so then they can come from outside, because we cannot use from here, because this from would be initialized during this execution, and actually the content is animating even here, so we cannot execute from of this node before this node doesn't we are not aware of this node down the graph. So this resets the children to our initial position. This animates the dash examples title. Basically it just falls down. And then we have this bigger branch which basically animates the content into the screen, and then iterates over the buttons, and then animate their position in and scale, a bit of scaling. So let's run it once again, as you can see. So now let's say I want to have an event that executes after this has been shown. So something like on shown, and let's say it's a global event, so some manager is listening. And okay, so what I did in hackathon is I always checked these branches. Okay, this is a 0 time branch. This is, I don't know what time, because it uses animation time, but it's pretty quick. And then this branch has a 0.4 seconds to animate the content in, and then animates the children with a 0.1 second delay, and the animation itself is 0.2 seconds. So it's like 0.3 second per child, so it's 1.2, 1.6 with the content second. So it's by far the longest. So what I did is basically, okay, this is the longest branch. I will plug it here and execute it, and it executes after all the animations were executed. So, but what if I come here and just for some reason I want to animate the text, or someone comes and animates the text, retarget it to our text, use reference, okay, and then I'm using like a half a second per character, which will be almost a 6 second, or it will be even exactly 6 seconds. So it comes and it animates. We already fired the event that our menu or our screen is shown. So someone somewhere is working with it, some manager or some other block of code in our project. But we may have more complex execution here that it's still firing something like changing variables or other events. So we shouldn't really fire this event before, or so what I would do is connect this here and disconnect this one. Okay, now this is the longest branch. It can execute. So what I came up with is accumulate node, and let me show you. I will, instead of an event, I will use another node that I just added in 0.4.8, which is just to play sound. Uh, so for example, okay, right now it will play the sound. Okay, I'll need to enable sound in editor. Okay, you probably don't hear it because it's not capturing the sounds. So let's use a debug. So we will debug the output here. Okay, so now let's use the new accumulate node, and in this case. So what I would do is add the accumulate node. It's a new type of node that I've added some other features inside Dash just to accommodate this new node and others that will come after it, because this node can have any number of unique inputs. So it will dynamically increase the number or decrease the number of inputs as you use it. So let's say we want to plug this in. As you can see, it created a new unique input for you. Why I call it unique? Because you still can plug any number of outputs inside the first input if you want to, but it's not unique. Let me show you what it means. It will be taken as a normal input with this ID. So let's say I want to fire this debug, so plug it into it, and I have these two inputs here. So I can say the accumulate node what it should do and how it should execute. There are actually just two settings, three. One of them is hidden. I will show you. And first is the accumulation type, and second one is that if it should repeat itself, which is probably almost always true. So I will check to default, because if we want to show that screen multiple times and we don't really want to execute it just once, because then you would be only able to execute the showing of the screen just once, which may be your use case, but by default I would set it to true. So what this now does, it will execute if all the inputs came. So let's say I can even plug this here. If all the inputs come into this accumulate node, it will execute. So let me show you. You can see that the inputs are coming, and uh, then it fired, because I forgot that this is the longest. Okay, I will just put it here, because it was waiting, the debug was waiting for this node that I didn't see outside of the screen. So let me show you once more. I will clear this. Okay, this one fired, now this one fired, and now we are waiting for it. And once it fired, the debug is there. I have just some trash here. Let me remove it. So it fired as it should. I can even remove uh, this one. It doesn't really matter, and you can see it decreased the number of unique inputs. So if we remove, it will automatically reconnect the input. So this one was plugged into a second input, but I removed the first input. It automatically decreased the number of inputs and reconnected this one to the first input. So let's fire once again without the trash. We see this one, and now we are waiting for this one, and the execution of the debug node was there. And this is basically how I would manage branches in my UI animations in most cases. There are some more complicated cases where I would use what I call an counter, event counter, but this is more readable than an event counter, and it offers other options. So, for example, let's say I don't want this one, I don't want this one. We can say that the accumulation type is any. If any, it basically works as a null node because it will execute on any input. Any of them come, then it will execute. If you disable the repeat accumulation, it will execute just once on any input, but just once for the whole runtime of the controller. So not just for this show, basically. I'm thinking about managing the reset of this as well. I will use a different approach. Then you have uh, any count and any and unique count. Let me show you on the children. For example, you want the execution of the debug on every second children. So basically there are 4 children. This will execute just twice because first one will be skipped, then okay, we need to add the repeated accumulation. So any input, so it means it will calculate or increase the count even when it's the same input. So let me show you. As you can see, the example 2 and example 4 just fired our debug. Then you have a unique count, which means this, if I set it the unique count to 2, but even though this executes 4 times, you can see that no debug was executed because it wasn't a unique input. So it will just be executed as, even though 4 times it's just the first input. So we need other input. So for example, let's say we want to, I will just delete this one. We have these 3 inputs, and I set it to unique count 2. Basically, this one is a 0 time, so it will execute directly, and then it will wait for either this one or this one. Either of them, the unique count will be 2, and the debug will be executed. So let me show you. And as you can see, it doesn't really matter that this one didn't execute because it was the third one. So this is the first implementation of the Accumulate node. It will be in the Dash version 0.4.8 that I will just release, and any feedback is welcome. There are other features that I am planning, as well as more management around this Accumulate node. So that's all for today. Thanks.